Me, Jeffy, and today we're gonna be reacting to something very spooky. It's scary TikToks you should not watch alone. So I hope you enjoy. Like, subscribe, and let's get into it.
There is only one rule.
I'm trying to run, but it's getting closer to my window. What the hell?
Jeepers creepers.
Oh, no! No! Oh no! 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 This is already scary. What just happened? What this just happened? What?
Mom!
That door just opened. What's on? A doll that scares me more than Annabelle.
With Halloween right around the corner, let's get right into this. When you think of a haunted doll, you most likely think of this. Well, in 2013, a mother bought her daughter a frozen Elsa doll. Basically, the doll would sing Let It Go in English, and for the first 2 years, nothing really happened. Until in 2015, it would alternate from singing in English to singing in Spanish, and that was not a setting on the doll. In December of 2019, the mom claimed that the doll would turn on at random moments of the night, and she had never changed the batteries after having it for 6 years. The mom then secretly threw the doll away in the trash can and was alarmed when she found it hidden in a bench 2 weeks later. Her kids still claim to this day that they had no idea that she even was throwing away the doll and do not know how it appeared again. I really want to talk about this photo. The security guard at the Bryson Avenue Mall located in Virginia took this photo in 2011. It would later be turned into police, but the woman seen here was never found. For context, the security guard's name was Sean Mercado, and he worked the night shift at this mall. But the mall had been having strange things happening for like weeks. Like on after hours, there are store alarms going off, but nobody's ever found. They're hearing people run through the mall, but again, they never see anybody. Until one night when Sean Mercado goes out to have a cigarette, he's just kind of patrolling the parking lot, and he goes back to enter through the employee entrance when he saw this woman staring back at him from inside the mall. He takes
Oh my god!
And then he radios for backup, and he goes in after her. Claimed to chase her as fast as he could, but he eventually lost her inside that mall. And despite a police investigation, she would never be found.
That was scary.
It's one of those pictures. One of the pictures where you don't see it at first, right? This photo comes out of Wisconsin State University. It's from 2012, and it was taken by Aaron Silva. What looks like just an abandoned hallway, if you look very close to the back left, you'll see it. The outline of a person who had been watching him from around the corner. For context, this was a very common tradition at this school. A lot of people would dare each other to go inside the abandoned infirmary that was just on campus. You go inside using just a flashlight, and whoever stays in the longest eventually wins. But Aaron was never going to make it out. After more than an hour had passed, his friends eventually became concerned, and they go in looking for him, where they found him and described him as cut from the mouth down to the center of his chest. This was a hugely disturbing case for police, but they eventually do retrieve his phone, and they zero in on this picture, a picture which they believe shows who might have done this to Aaron. And if you increase the brightness, you can see the outline even better.
Scaretober Day 11. This is Norman. Around 18 years ago, Norman was built to appear in a music video for the band Interpol, and for some reason, people seem to adore him. However, Norman then disappeared for 10 years. Then, in 2014, an auction on iCollector.com titled Animatronic Creepy Ghoul Puppet from a Music Video was listed, and sure enough, it was Norman. Norman resurfaced after 10 years, and it was shocking to see what horrible, disturbing shape he was in. Despite having a strong fan following, no one bought him, and he disappeared once again for another 5 years. He was then found and acquired by a YouTuber, and, well, the rest speaks for itself.
That's scary. That is actually scary.
Disturbing facts that will ruin your day, part 6. There are only 2 days that do not last 24 hours. The one of your birth and the one of your death.
Pacu is a South American freshwater fish known for its squarer, straighter teeth
Ooh.
that eerily resemble those of humans. This is how a toothbrush looks like under a microscope after the first use. Google hires camels for the desert street view. Terrifying urban legends that turned out to be true, Part 2. In October 1970, a couple reported seeing a man dressed in a white suit and wearing bunny ears who began yelling at them that they were on private property. It was then theorized that this man was the Bunny Man, an urban legend about an escaped mental patient in Virginia who took to gutting teens and hanging them from a bridge underpass. Locals were cautioned to never be caught near the underpass, which is now known to most people as the Bunny Man Bridge.
They're actually not, but I do have one that just wrote an hour ago called She's Here. It's story time. Take a seat. Those monsters taste horrible, by the way. Gerald Fredrickson was a disgusting man. From the time he was a small boy all the way to his teenage years, Gerald found pleasure in torturing animals and beating up kids that walked home alone, while other kids found interest in sports and video games. And being as big of a person as he was, there was almost nobody at any time that could ever tell him no or resist him. At the time he was 30 years old, Gerald was a full-blown menace with nothing but an ice cream truck to his name. 70 kills under his belt, all young girls and boys.
Oh my.
The town was in absolute chaos, but nobody would suspect the jolly old ice cream man, Gerald thought to himself. So one day during a long and boring day of ice cream routes, Gerald decided to strike again. He had promised a young girl named Susan a few days ago a free vanilla cone. All she had to do was meet him at 9 p.m. sharp, just outside of town. Sure enough, 9 p.m. came, and Susan found herself walking up to the bright ice cream truck with the same red band in her head that she wore every day. Too easy, Gerald said to himself as he quickly turned the engine on. He shined his brights directly in her face and then punched the gas. The ice cream truck clipped little Susan, sending her flying across the street and barely clinging to life. Gerald then walked over to her weak body, scooped her up, placed her in the truck, and she was never heard from again. Just another victim of the mystery killer in town. What a hot little biscuit that was, Gerald proclaimed as he returned home after burying the body far away. He then sat on his couch and began to channel surf, but after a few minutes of that, he began to hear a small girl outside his window laughing. My God, those sound like Susan's laughs, Gerald said to himself, as he moved his large body all the way to his window, and then what he saw terrified him. It in fact was little Susan, but she looked very different. Her hair floating about wildly with no breeze. Her skin a very sickly gray color with cuts that were crawling with maggots. And a smile made of nightmares that went from ear to ear with rotten teeth visible. Oh Lord, she's here, Gerald screamed. He then quickly got dressed and ran all the way to his murderous ice cream truck. Gerald then locked his doors and prepared to make his getaway by fixing his rearview mirror. But what he saw petrified him. He was looking right into the eyes of his ghostly victim, Susan. Gerald then screamed and screamed and screamed. No one ever would find the body of Susan, but they did find Gerald. His skin was that same sickly gray color with cuts that were crawling with maggots. His face was disturbingly contorted. But what confused the townsfolk the most was the red headband they found wrapped around his neck so tight that it cut through his skin and crushed his windpipe. It was the same one that little Susan had wore every day. From then on, every disgusting criminal that popped up in that town was found in the same shape as they found Gerald the ice cream man, with Susan's red bow tightly wrapped around their neck. Like and comment for more stories.
Can you do the one where the bride gets trapped in a chest? I know exactly which one you're talking about. It's called The Bride. This was a very popular one. So the story goes like there was a couple who had just gotten married, and during their wedding reception, they were having lots of fun, dancing, singing, and even playing games and contests. One of the games that they decided to play was hide and seek. The bride went up to the attic and was looking for a place to hide when she came across a giant chest. She opened the chest and climbed in, thinking nobody would ever find her in there, and that when they went up to the attic to look for her, she could pop out and scare them. Well, right after she had climbed into the chest, the top had slammed down and hit her in the head, knocking her unconscious. As she fell inside the trunk, the lid then slammed closed and locked. Everybody was looking for her, but nobody looked inside the trunk. After a while, they started searching elsewhere, searching all over the wedding venue and even all across town. Nobody knows how long she was banging on the trunk after she had come out of her unconscious state. But still, she was all the way in the attic and nobody could hear her. After a while of searching for her, all of her friends and family decided that she was gone and that they would just stop looking for her. Nobody ever knew what happened to her except for one day a maid was looking for something in the house where the wedding venue had taken place. She went up into the attic searching for this item and thought maybe it's in the trunk. So she opened the trunk and to her horror, the corpse of the bride was in the trunk, withered away to only a skeleton. wearing her wedding dress.
So Donna was left alone in the house. Then one night she heard the doorbell ring. She went downstairs and was about to open the door, assuming it was her father. But she stopped. Something wasn't right. She looked through the peephole and saw her father staring back at her. His eyes were wide open and he looked terrified. But the doorbell kept ringing. Donna said, "Dad, did you forget your keys?" No answer. "Dad, say something." Still no answer. Donna said, "I'm not opening the door until you say something." Eventually the ringing stopped and Donna fell asleep. The next morning she looked through the peephole again. Her father was still there as if he hadn't moved all night. She finally opened the door and what she saw horrified her. Her father's head was hanging from above the door, and there was a note attached to the doorbell with only 2 words: "Clever girl."
This is the scary story about the voice. One night, a young girl was lying in bed, just on the verge of falling asleep, when she suddenly heard her mother calling her name from the kitchen. She then got up and began walking down the stairs to see what her mother wanted. But as she got halfway down the stairs, she heard her mother's voice from the top of the staircase say, "Don't go down there. I heard the voice too."
True scary stories in 60 seconds or less. This story comes from a Reddit user about the night that changed her life forever. In a rare occurrence, this girl's whole family was going out for the night. Her mother was going out, her sister wasn't coming home, she had the entire house to herself. So she just decided to curl up in her bedroom, have a cozy night in, and watch a Netflix series. But not even 30 minutes in, she suddenly heard noises coming from downstairs in her kitchen. The faint sound of an unknown man laughing to himself from downstairs. She was paralyzed with fear because she remembered she left her cell phone on the downstairs counter, but she also knew if she emailed 911, eventually somebody would come. She waited for 7 agonizing minutes until police eventually come, and there is an eruption of screams and wrestling from the kitchen. When they found her and brought her downstairs, she was told to close her eyes, as she later learned in horror that the man who had been in her kitchen had her mother spread out on the floor in pieces.
This is why you should never go to a sleepover. Back in 2013, a kid named John was sleeping over at his friend's house. John and his friend Robert were having a good time playing video games and staying up late. After a while, they decided it was time to go to sleep, so they called it a night. Robert fell asleep in his bed while John tried to fall asleep in his sleeping bag. John couldn't fall asleep because he kept on hearing these strange breathing noises. He thought it was Robert snoring, so he threw a pillow at him to wake him up. Robert woke up confused and said, "What's wrong?" John said, "Stop snoring, I can't go to sleep." As soon as John said that, he looked underneath Robert's bed and saw something terrifying. There was a man with long black hair underneath Robert's bed. The man put his finger on his lips and tried to shush John, but John started screaming in terror. And you won't believe what happens next. Like for part 2.
A teenage girl notices a pickup truck following her home one night after leaving a high school basketball game. At first she thought we must be going in the same direction, but then she began to watch the truck in her rearview mirror. When she sped up, so did he. When she passed a car, he did too. Then he turned on his high beams and left them on for quite some time, so she began to feel uneasy. She tried speeding away, but he would continue to follow her, flashing his high beams the entire drive. Finally, she pulled into her driveway, but the truck pulled in right behind her. She jumped out of her car and ran into her house, telling her father to call the police. But when police arrived, the man had a gun in his hand and told them that he wasn't the one they should be arresting. He pointed inside of the girl's now parked car, and there was a man crouched behind the driver's seat with a knife. The man had slipped into the girl's car just before she left the school game, and the man in the truck saw it all happen but had no way to stop it. So he followed her car, and each time the man in the back seat reached up to stab the girl, the truck driver would flash his high beams and the killer would drop back down into the seat to avoid getting caught.
Scary stories in 60 seconds or less. So this girl had worked at Nordstrom's as a seasonal employee every Christmas through college for the last 3 years. On her closing shift, it was only her and her manager, and she had the task of closing down the women's floor before she would clock out. After all of her nightly to-dos, she went to the women's dressing room to hit the lights before she was going to leave. But she was startled by something. A pair of men's shoes that were under one of the dressing room doors. She was mostly kind of annoyed by this because they had already made announcements saying the store was closing, so she just kind of makes a declarative statement and says, "Sir, you have to leave the store, we are closing in 10 minutes. But she got no response, so she started to feel a little uneasy when suddenly the feet turned in her direction. But oddly enough, she wasn't feeling afraid, so she just approached the door and opened it. But then she froze. There was no one in that dressing room. This was not an instance of her eyes playing tricks on her. She saw feet and legs, and they moved under that door.
Terrifying things caught at hospitals. 2 friends were exploring an abandoned hospital when suddenly...
these students were recording a short film inside a mental hospital when they noticed something strange.
Huh? That's
This mostly empty-looking hospital in Honduras seems innocuous, but
Let's edit it, bro.
scary stalkers caught on camera. This scared man was recording a video with his phone saying that someone was following him.
I'm pretty sure I'm being followed. I've been taking a rather circuitous route. See that woman back there? I've been taking a rather circuitous route around. And she got interested in what I was up to.
This woman was returning home when suddenly... This woman was peacefully walking around with her son, but then...
Alright guys, let's talk about 7/25/2005 and what happened on that day. A SpongeBob episode aired that day and actually glitched out and caused static all over the TV and freeze frames to happen.
I love
These freeze frames weren't really normal though. A lot of them were really creepy and freaked a lot of kids out. For example, the one behind me. There was also a part where SpongeBob and Gary are just in a shoe and they're staring at the screen smiling for like an hour. A lot of people managed to capture this on YouTube, so I'm gonna play that clip right now and show you guys what happened that day.
SpongeBob?
No, 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 no.
Have you guys heard about the staircases in the woods? Apparently,
Show
deep
Peter
in the
West
forest,
video.
there are staircases that lead to nowhere, and you are absolutely supposed
What are you
to stay away
doing?
from them. So, 36%
No!
of the U.S.
Get back!
is covered in forest. That's